Does anyone have an extra pen? I just couldn't get out of the car and walk back up to the house and get one.
I've got one if you don't.
Like, I'm now going back up.
Dawn is laying on our couch for the fourth day in a row. She hurt her back, and I've had her to the doctor 3 times.
Thank you.
She wants them back too.
So-
We're on a tight budget down
That's the
here.
city.
Yeah. I don't blame you. They should.
We're live.
Let me tell you. You just go.
So everybody ready? We'll call the meeting to order and
Sorry.
what?
I just said hi to Keith because I hadn't said hello to him.
First item on there is approval of the agenda in its current form. Is there any additions, revisions, or whatever we want to do?
I'll make that motion.
I'd like to,
Oh, I'm sorry.
to add, I don't know, make it 2A maybe, below the, after the minutes are approved, although we need to go, yeah, below the minutes. Realignment or reappointment or whatever of the officer, of our chairman and co-chair. Just to keep everything
Vice
up on
chair.
the, up
Vice
in
chair,
the,
not co-chair.
Reorganization then.
reorganizational meeting, just to keep everything on the up and the up,
And I appreciate that.
because of the fact that there was
makes
so
sense.
much trouble with the present format that personnel we have now.
Well, it just makes it more clear, I think,
Yeah.
if we redo it.
Yeah,
Good
it's
idea.
clear.
And I'm fine with that.
Any other additions,
No,
corrections?
but I will still make a motion to accept as amended.
I'll second the motion.
Charlie made the motion, Sherry seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries forward.
May I ask who's taking the notes? Who's going to
like
write the
Randy.
minutes?
Pam's taking the notes.
Oh, you're still going to take notes? Aren't you
Somebody else is going to
awesome?
write them up.
As long as I'm here, I will.
Who's doing the minutes for next time? We said we were rotating them, and I did them this
Maybe
time.
Pam will be here.
No, she's talking about writing them up.
No, it's got to be one of you three. I did them last time.
Okay, next meeting, I will do it, as long as I get proper notice of the meeting, so I can make sure I can fit in my schedule.
What about this one?
What about this one?
I'll do this one, Pam.
Randy,
Just
I'll do
give me
this
your-
one.
This is
just
gonna be
give me
short
your-
and sweet, though, it should be.
Yeah, that's the one I'm
You
gonna
should
do.
pick this one.
You haven't seen my hands scribbling.
And Sherry says you do a tremendous job of note taking.
She does.
So,
I wish I remembered my shorthand's what I wish I did.
I'm
Then
glad you don't.
unfortunately,
She
you guys
does a
probably wouldn't.
fantastic job with note-taking.
So, okay, the first item on there is approval of the minutes. Sherry provided those.
Did everybody get a chance to read them? If not, here's a copy.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't on the committee at that time.
Pam, did you get a copy? I did update them. I should send you the update because I had one typo in there, money-wise.
Okay,
I can just give this one to you.
okay, yeah, because I've got this other one. and I'll put
It's
it
got
in
the
book.
correct dollar amount.
Okay.
That was the only change after I emailed them to everyone.
So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make that motion.
Charlie makes the motion. A second.
I'll second.
Sherry seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
One.
Keith. So it's 3-0-1. Reorganization. We need nominations for a chairman.
I nominate Randy to retain, but officially be put in by this group.
And I'll second.
Any other nominations? With that said, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. So I guess I'm still here. So the next one is the vice chair. I'm looking for a nomination.
I'm going to nominate Sherry.
Sherry is vice chair. A second.
I'll second that.
Second, Charlie. Any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Okay. Next item is advertisement to fill vacancy. And
Randy, I got a question on this one.
okay,
Because when it was first formed, we started out with the 2 council, 2 commissioners. Then the commissioners appointed one, which I believe was Aaron at the time.
It was.
The council appointed you, Sherry.
Correct.
And then we were supposed to have a co-person between the 2 boards. And going back to the night, why did we go to that vote, Sherry? Do you remember why we did that?
Well, all I remember is, because it didn't happen that way, it was the committee who selected someone. And-
Right, we put Aaron on, but
And I believe what Luke said before the meeting was that they had decided that it would be joint if the committee did it, because the committee was all appointed by
Okay.
both areas. And so then, if, I went back and looked at it too.
Yeah, because I was
There were
confused
two
because
nominations, there were
we-
2 nominations,
Right.
and this board selected the last one.
Right, okay, but, you know, originally when it was set up, it was 2 commissioners, 2 council, 1 from each board, and then a joint from both boards. And then, because the night you were appointed, I also made the nomination of Tara as being the council, and the council passed that. I don't know, I don't recall what the commissioners did back then. And then when we had that meeting,
Maybe the commissioners was the other person who was nominated, and then.
I don't know,
they went to the
I don't know, but I'm fine with this, but I just wanted to rehash, you know, how that
But
happened.
yes, I agree.
Because it was confusing.
It was this group who
Yeah.
picked the 7th member.
Right, I remember we voted on it,
There were two nominations, and it was this group.
so,
So,
I suggest we follow what the committee did before.
That's fine, that's fine.
My thinking is we'll advertise. I don't really care to wait 6 weeks. If we're comfortable with a couple weeks to get it out, put it on Facebook, get it on the county website, get
I
people
think,
that's
I think that
interested.
I agree with you. I think 2 weeks is
Those
plenty of
people.
time. I mean, I
well,
don't.
my thing is, I just want another community member on here who
Yes.
is not a commissioner or a councilman.
We need to get the
So that
board
I'm not the
established.
only one.
Right.
There needs to be another, just civil,
and the commissioners will have
Citizen
another one
representative.
also.
yes.
So there
but
should
they're
be
waiting-
2
There should be 2 additional.
additional,
But they're waiting
From the
6
public.
weeks.
yeah, because they set that policy and the council, you know, followed along.
Right,
Now,
and that's fine.
Can we do that and say 2 weeks?
I think as a
We can do what
board
we
we
want.
can, a
Yeah,
committee.
that's just the policy that they
They
normally
said,
follow.
okay.
They
Maybe
normally
it's not-
follow the
it's not
6
wrote
weeks.
in ink.
Maybe what do
That's
you
just
think
a
about a
policy that they
motion that
follow.
if an opening comes up in the future, that this board's going to nominate, that we set that date as 2 weeks?
I
And
mean,
then
I'm
we-
fine with that, because I really believe generally, if you have an interest in it,
They're going to.
2 weeks is
jump on it.
sufficient. 6 weeks, people have a tendency to forget about it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if they have an interest, the main thing is to get it out,
Right.
Right.
so that
Okay.
people can't come back in and say, I was uninformed.
Well, and
So-
also in case something would happen, whoever this board appoints, let's say, next year they
Right.
decide to drop off,
All
then.
kinds of things can
Right.
happen. We could have all kinds of, yeah.
Exactly, so.
Somebody could step in an open
Yeah,
water.
everything, and falling head first.
Only someone who is totally unlucky
like
at a
it.
jinx would step in a water meter hole.
No, hey, don't feel bad, I've gone through them too. Mhm.
If everybody's comfortable with that, I'd entertain a motion to advertise, put a 2-week time constraint on it, not only this one, but also
In
going
the future.
forward. So we would try to keep the board to full size as quickly as possible.
So we're talking about doing it for this one too, just for our.
Do it for this one, and
Okay.
then, then on going forward, if we do have a vacancy.
Everybody's good with that?
I'm
I'm
good with
fine,
it.
I'll make that motion, Randy.
I'll second
Charlie, and second, Keith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0.
Okay, can I add something in here?
Sure.
Okay, you said something about advertising on the website. I am going to be honest, that is one thing that I have not tackled, is that website, to
Okay.
get it on there. And
it. We can, between word of mouth and Facebook, Sherry, can you put it on Facebook and then we'll share it?
Or you can put it in the paper.
I mean, I can call the news or send an email to the, or send an email out to the news
Just as
to
much
do
as
it.
possible. I really believe we probably get better circulation if somebody posts it on Facebook into
Yeah.
like the
We should do
newspaper.
both. Let's do
Yeah,
both.
as much as
Okay.
possible.
Absolutely.
So if you guys will do Facebook,
We'll get something out.
I'll do the email to the news then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Type up some kind of a statement, just basically asking for
And
their.
do you want to go 2 weeks from when it's announced to the public? Or are we talking 2 weeks
Well,
from
today
the
is
meeting?
what,
That's-
the
12th,
Yeah.
so,
14
The
days would be
26th?
26.
Or you could go that Monday, the 29th.
That'd be better.
Okay, let's
Except
just
until the
make it-
29th.
Let's don't wait to
put it out, let's put it out as soon as possible.
Monday
Right,
the
call it Monday the
29th.
I'll
29th.
advertise, I'll email the news as soon as this is
I
over.
really kind of also feel as if I'd really like community people to apply who have been following this. And I think they'll definitely find out about it if they watch. I mean, there are several community people who watch these after they, and that would be nice to have someone who's known what's going on.
Kind of up to speed,
Yes.
because it takes a little while.
You'll find that out.
Oh, I know it.
You'll find
Did
that out.
did you ever get a password to get into that site yet?
Nope.
And he won't until Emily comes back on
Back from-
15th.
Yeah.
And then I think
Oh,
that
this, she comes back
the
the 15th of this
15th,
month?
and then
Okay.
I intend to contact her and get the documents downloaded so Pam could put them in the file.
Okay.
I've been struggling to get those.
That's why I
She'll
answered
get-
you, because I wasn't even sure, since it closed down from you first, I wasn't even sure if you guys could still get back in there.
We just can't change anything,
Okay.
can't, and
That's why
what
I
we
let Keith know,
have,
because I wasn't sure what your options were at this point.
I can look at what my report was, but what we need to do is have a clean one for your
Yeah, because see, I
records.
was never set up to even get in there, so
Right.
I was
So-
gonna actually, but I was never set up to get in there, so I
That way we'll
couldn't
have
help you.
for records, and then Keith also then can access them. He can't, vote on them or anything, but he can read
Mhm.
what they were proposing and the documents they
Yeah.
submitted, so it'll help him catch up, so. With that said, let's move on to Baker Tilly, that's the ornery one. My thought, we've got these entities right here, and I think we need to go through them, and if there's, the ones we have, if we're comfortable with some, I think we just need to get a contract that's acceptable between the county and the person we're gonna supply the funds to, and they don't require review. If we're uncomfortable with them, then I think we need to pick those out and have Baker Tilly go through them.
I
And-
agree.
And to make sure, I don't know if
Money
anybody
saving.
is aware of them, I mean, it's quite expensive.
That's one thing about it, with the questions and answers that the city has given us, there's some of them that there's no sense in us spending the money at Baker Tilly
Correct.
because we know what the answer is,
Right.
Okay.
as much as we hate
I
that.
know. We're just
But we
playing by
didn't write the
the rules.
rules.
That's right.
You know, we didn't write the rules and
Treasury made the rules, we're just following them.
I mean, it's,
If I may, Josh Harris has contacted me. I don't know if he's contacted anyone else on the board.
Mhm.
He's the one that asked for the 75,000
Right.
for the remodeling of that room.
Yes.
Apparently, that may have fallen through, that he's not going to get that room.
Right.
He's wanting to discuss about amending his grant to use money for other things. And I told him probably that would
I know
fall
those
into the
things.
next, when we open this back up to nonprofit and that he could resubmit then.
I'm kind of in agreement with you on that, Charlie. I think we need to get through these ones, and then we can decide the process, how we're gonna go forward, because I think if we start modifying different people's applications on the front, in his case, if I remember correctly, I think it was 45,000 he was gonna use for counseling, and 30,000 for room renovation. Well, clearly, with the information we
Right,
found.
we know we couldn't-
We know the room renovation is not eligible.
Right.
So, we need to, instead of him trying to modify it, you know, and then he becomes the only one that's allowed to modify it. then
Right.
we open a
That's
can
why I
of-
I think
said
that he needs,
that he would have
in my
to come
opinion,
in.
he needs to withdraw it.
Yeah, and
Or we fund his-
resubmit it when it's open to the rest of them again.
Unless we want to fund the 45 on counseling
And we could,
with the stipulations, as Baker Tilly says, it cannot have any religious.
right.
My recommendations on that is if he don't have a place, you know, if he don't have something, is, once again, is just to hand him $45,000 and my recommendation would be to resubmit your whole plan.
Yeah. He said that they were looking at some other locations here in town, and they wanted to hire a licensed counselor. That was their plan. And I told him just to hold off until we met, so we could discuss this, so one of us can approach him again and say, hey, basically, we're just, whenever we reopen for all these, you can resubmit. Are you all right with that, Keith, or do you want to go ahead and, you know?
I think, in my opinion, as much as I know and agree that mental health and counseling and that is so important, I don't see how we can hand him $45,000 not knowing his plan.
Right, and that's why I think we'd be better off letting him go back through the process again.
Exactly,
But
rather
as
than,
far
because like
as-
Randy said, we can't set a precedence with
Right.
him,
Right,
letting
no,
him
no.
modify his plan.
But think about, we did fund two separate parts, and one part of it we know is unfundable. But my
Right.
question is, there's not really a modification to the first part because he's requesting money to provide counseling services, and that's what he's still doing.
And if you had access.
And we don't
he-
care where.
He supposedly through their church affiliation, if I remember correctly, they have been supplying mental health services to Perry County residents out of Owensboro.
Right.
That was one of our questions. is
Mhm.
How's this all coming about? You know, because we're wanting our money spent within Perry County, the
Right.
people that live here and that, and that's where he was doing the
Wasn't this is the
renovation.
one, was he the one that you were hesitant on because nobody had an Indiana license?
Yes.
That was,
and
that was the other part of it.
And
There
we
been
asked the
some red
question,
flags.
and I think he responded, and that's what brought
We were
an affirmative action. because
satisfied
he
with that
was waiting.
response, that they were not going to provide
Counseling
religious
for religious,
services.
yeah.
It was going to
Anything
be,
that is connected, and if you, like the Tell City responses they got back, you know, if you're gonna have you can have a daycare, but you can't, you know, have contingency that you've gotta go to church, or you have to do
okay,
these things.
so
pantry.
can I make an input? Before we go any further, we're discussing all this, and I'm not sure that anyone watching will understand what we're talking about with the city. Could you read through, just for note, for people watching, the replies that we have gotten from Baker Tilly, actually the city has gotten, which we're sharing with one
Yes.
another, those things that we can't fund that we thought maybe we could, or maybe just read through all the questions asked and the answers. I think that would be helpful for understanding.
Sherry, why don't I delegate that to you, since you
Oh,
have a great
wonderful.
idea?
That's way too low. You think I could read that? I'm old.
I brought
Surgery, it's
up
much
large.
better.
Yeah, well, some of us can't do that. Oh, my gosh. Tell City asked Baker Tilly about funding for Chamber of Commerce. The responses below. And these were all responses that were received in an email, so it's not someone's interpretation of the response. It's the email that came back from Baker Tilly. It turns out that Treasury had considered expanding the definition of nonprofit organizations to 501c6 organizations, but ultimately decided to only expand the definition to include 501c19 organizations. However, 501c6 organizations can still be eligible to receive funds from ARPA. The final rule discusses this in footnote 235, which states, quote, "To the extent impacted by the pandemic, 501c6 organizations may be eligible to receive funds to support eligible uses that align with their overall purpose. Example, tourism promotion in aid of impacted industry, end quote. I do not believe the Chamber of Commerce would be able to apply as, quote, impacted, but they could receive funds to support uses that align with other services they offer, but awards of that type may ultimately be considered a subrecipient type of relationship instead of a beneficiary. That's the end of that, and just discussion, we had agreed we weren't doing subrecipient. It's too much paperwork.
Define the subrecipient. The subrecipient is if we give a grant to an organization and they in turn re-grant it to another organization. And the reason that's kind of a tough situation because there's a tremendous amount of reporting that goes along with a subrecipient because they're trying to keep the wheels on the car in according to Treasury, and by giving it to one organization who gives it to another, they feel like Treasury may be taken out of the loop and it may be used for something outside of Treasury's regulations. And it creates an issue, and they want a lot of oversight and reports if we enter into something like that. That was our reasoning for staying out of subrecipients.
Okay. Tell City asked Baker Tilly about funding of religious organizations. Here's their response. Religious or faith-based organizations can compete for and receive ARPA funds or other federal funds, but the awarded funds could not be used for, quote, inherently religious activities, end quote. The award must be to provide eligible services or for other eligible uses of funds allowed by ARPA regulations, and cannot discriminate who can receive services based on the basis of religion. Additionally, the activity funded cannot incorporate religious activities. For example, ARPA could potentially be used to fund a church-hosted community daycare program, so long as the daycare does not involve Bible study, attending Mass, or other religious activities as a condition of participating. It is also for this reason that churches cannot apply for the assistance due to pandemic impact, as the funds would definitely be used for inherent religious activities. The religious organization would be able to request ARPA funds from the city to fund mental health, and I guess that would be the county as well, to fund mental health services they provide, but not for renovating the church that they would want to use for them.
That addresses the revised issue.
Okay. Next, Tell City asked Baker Tilly about the following categories for their proposed applications distribution. Response. Category, assistance to small business and nonprofits, projects, nonprofit and small business, $150,000. The project is allowable with the following restrictions. Recipients must show that they were impacted by the pandemic. This can be done by reviewing financial data showing a reduction in revenue or other large unexpected expenses that were caused by the pandemic. Awards must be in the form of loans or grants for operating expenses. Capital expenditures are not allowed unless the city can show documentation that the affected business was disproportionately impacted, which is a very high bar to meet unless the business or nonprofit operates in a qualified census tract. So I guess a couple of explanations. Capital expenditures means spending things like building or, renovating.
New roof.
Fix the roof.
Fix the roof.
Buy
those
new
kind of
equipment.
things. Okay. Category, revenue, this is still the same response. Another category, revenue replacements. Projects. Should I read these projects or not?
They've been advertised.
Yeah.
That's
I mean-
So it's okay?
Knowledge, yeah.
Okay.
Public knowledge.
Update Tell City website, $10,000. JFK pool expenses, $25,000. City Hall downstairs bathrooms, ADA, $15,000. Basketball court, Hagerton Park, $15,000. Joe Schaefer Park, $25,000. Dog park, $10,000. Pickleball court, Hagerton Park, $20,000. Restroom improvements, Parks Department, $5,000. Beautification committee, $5,000. Computer equipment, $50,000. Trash truck, $120,000, and penetrating radar unit, water department, $20,000. The projects listed above align well with the revenue replacement category of the ARP that the city has elected to use the $10 million replacement amount offered by the U.S. Treasury. The requirements for expenditure in this category is simply that the expense must be for a government service that is, quote, normally provided, end quote, by the city to the public. For these expenditures, be sure to follow proper procurement procedures. Small purchases are those that are between $10,000 and $150,000. Federal regulations require that an, quote, adequate number, end quote, of quotes be obtained for small purchases. State law requires that a minimum of 3 quotes be solicited for the purchase of supplies and equipment where the total amount is greater than $50,000. Relevant code references related to procurement are below. 2 CFR 200.319, Federal Competition Requirements. 2 CFR 200.320, Federal Methods of Procurement. IC 5-22, State Purchasing Requirements, Services and Supplies. IC 36-1, State Purchasing Requirements, Public Works Projects. Next category.
1 minute, Sherry.
Yes.
And what those all align with are basic government services that are carried out in the normal business of the county. The city in this case was referenced. But it's things the county normally does as a government unit. They are applicable to using ARP funds.
And that would be like the funds we've used for the equipment, the
For instance,
equipment and stuff.
You bought computers, you bought software, you bought the services of the county foundation. Those are all in line with normal county expenditures.
But this is revenue replacement, not for small business, but for government entities.
Government.
For government
It has to be
entities
government.
only.
So,
Okay, next category, wastewater and sewer infrastructure. Project Windy Creek, $30,000, and wastewater extensions, $150,000. These projects are allowable as per the final rule. They would be eligible under the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Windy Creek is eligible since it is a project to manage, reduce, treat, or recapture stormwater or subsurface drainage water. I believe the wastewater extension project is eligible since it is an expansion of service for the publicly owned treatment works. To answer the other question related to this project, because we set up a call to discuss the details of this project further, I'd like to get some additional information to make sure I provide the best answer. These projects must also be procured and documented properly as discussed above in the revenue replacement category. And that is all that we received.
so that brings some clarity to what we know today, and hopefully, I want to bring that up too, if there's some specific questions we would like to have answered by Baker Tilly, that we would discuss those here later on as to what we might want to know, so we could draft it in an email, get an answer. Just of what ifs. My thinking is, I don't want to put the people that have already applied back through this once again, only to be told by Baker Tilly that you're not eligible. I mean, it's a burden on them to put the documents together, and if they're not eligible, we need to make them aware of that rather than after the fact.
And I'm assuming that they're still going to go by the guidelines of the lost profit from 19 as the baseline?
That's a good question, Charlie, because we used the reference in that one final draft that the expenses need to have occurred after March something 2021. And I would like to ask that question, if that's, what is the affected period?
Exactly. I think that
You know,
is one of
what-
the questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, because we assumed that from the actual last Treasury report that that was the case, but I want them to say yes or no, and then if no, what actually is the period of time we need to be looking at for an impact? Because a lot of it is dealt upon the loss of revenue.
Right.
And if you haven't lost the revenue, and/or it's been replaced by
Reimbursed.
some other grant, then you actually haven't suffered, so
Right.
you wouldn't be eligible. Because that knocks a lot of them out if they can't.
And that was
substantiate
the
that.
That was the
requirement that
primary
knocked most
reason a
of
lot
them.
of them were knocked out in the first go-around,
Right.
because they didn't
Right.
provide the information that we had requested.
Documentation to prove that, and secondly, some of them actually were compensated in excess of their losses.
Exactly.
So we felt, the committee, and I wasn't on at the time, but my understanding decided that what they wanted to do was to, the impacted entities get money back that actually suffered a loss as quick as possible, and it hasn't worked out so quickly,
Well,
but.
But
that was the
yes, and
intent.
Charlie and I were both on
Yes.
it, and we had all agreed that we did not want to award funding to small business and nonprofit that had not indeed lost money.
Right.
We wanted to give it to those organizations that had lost money. And so that's why we requested the proof. And, whether anyone thinks that what we requested was sufficient, not too much information, or whatever, those were the rules, and we followed them.
Followed.
But now we can move on to the next group and set the rules how, within the legal limits,
And
how we
I guess
would
my
like.
other question would be, also during that time, they had talked about a loss, but they also talked about a project, that you could use this money as a project in case the pandemic would ever happen again, that they would be able to stay open and they wouldn't lose their income. Is that still in the formula?
Good question, because, a capital, project, clearly, according to them, Baker Tilly is not eligible.
Right, and that's why I'd like an
Now-
explanation.
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of these organizations that have applied that are showing a project that they're wanting to do. And if that does not qualify, as you said, we need to let them know up front.
Right.
And
right.
I think part of the key, Charlie, is what you said, where the project has to be something to help them in case of, so saying roof repairs, that doesn't help them if the pandemic occurs. But an example I can think of, that, this is something that's already done, is, what's that place on Tell Street that a lot of people eat at? By the
Julie's?
Julie's. When the pandemic occurred, they built an outdoor seating area,
Right.
which allowed them to continue to serve.
Well, and there were some
Money,
questions
yeah,
about
or so
filtration
too.
system in your air conditioning,
Yes, that kind of thing.
things like
And see, the
that.
question is, if we strictly go back to what Baker Tilly said, an outside facility is a capital project,
Right.
it's not eligible. So we need to get clarity. That's
Exactly.
an excellent question to ask them, exactly, and give those examples so they can actually respond to it. And then we know going forward, legally, where we're at. So it's a good question.
I think maybe we want to discuss this, even if we want to meet with Baker Tilly when the city meets with Baker Tilly on the, I think it's the 29th, that Baker Tilly's going to be in town to basically go over the city's application. I think it's a workshop
Yeah.
type
The
setup.
workshop.
And then they plan on releasing their application, I think, on the 30th.
Right. We're past applicant,
I know, but still,
it's something to keep in mind. What?
To have one or two people go, maybe.
Yeah,
well, something else too, people that are thinking about going to apply for the next round of our money,
Yes.
for them to go to.
Exactly.
And then we
Yeah.
We should.
maybe ought to look and see if that application, and I'm not knocking anybody that
Right.
No,
had to
no,
do
I-
with previous before today. But, would their application that the city's gonna use, would have it worked out okay for here?
Their
with, you know,
application, I've seen it.
I know
And
it's
it
pretty
follows-
vague.
Yeah, but it follows a lot of the same thing, what did you suffer?
They
what
used
loss?
ours,
We-
they looked at ours before
Yeah.
they
And,
did
and
theirs.
Keith, you know, you weren't on the board, but we recommended to these groups that applied here that are in Tell City to apply for Tell City funding or Candleton's funding or, you know, whatever location they were at also. So a lot of them were going to put in applications both places.
And I think Tell City's asked, did you get any funds from other ARPs such as the
Right.
county? Well,
Then
that's a
we'll
tough
have-
one because we've got people that we're looking to hand money to, but we haven't done it yet. So
Exactly.
how they check that box, it probably is pending or something, but I think they're asking
Yeah,
that
they
question
have to
because they're
have
behind.
yes, no, or pending.
Yeah.
So,
So,
do you think we could ask the city if we could send a couple people then to attend
well, I
that
think it's
meeting?
open to the public.
Yeah,
open.
it's prob-
Then we ought to
well,
have a
in fact,
couple
it's
folks
even
go.
gonna be filmed.
Oh, okay.
So
we'll have
we
access.
can just attend it and ask the
Okay.
questions that
Okay.
we may want to know. So, other ideas, other things to, I mean, we can kind of leave this open. Sherry's wrote them down as we go through these here.
Okay, I think something we need to do
Pops up.
while we're on Baker Tilly is, we don't need eventually 7 people
No.
with Baker Tilly's number. We need a
One.
single person,
Right. And I would like to nominate Sherry to do that.
and I'll second it.
And I vote yea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What are neighbors for?
I know where you live.
Now, and I think, Keith, you've got a very valid point. She's pretty good with English.
Mhm.
She'll write down specifically what we want to know,
No speak English.
clear enough that we can get a response, and then she will share it with all of us.
Correct.
I'm fine with
And
that.
we will lessen the, I think the interaction, which is going to save us money. I'd prefer to spend the money locally rather than send it to the attorney.
One thing, of course, Sherry's smarter than me, but let's try to get all of our answers back in writing,
Right.
not
Right.
verbally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the phone conversation simply because people interpret things differently. And I would like to make sure that every answer I get, every single person on this committee gets as well.
Right.
And it's
I mean, I'm not
copied
saying- Like I
to you.
said, I'm not,
Well,
I'm just
And then if
saying,
you have
no.
further questions, get them to me and then
Sure.
I'll,
And it's similar to Tell Cities, they ask a question, they
I mean, that's
not
awesome.
answer.
And I commend Tell City on that effort.
Yeah.
I mean, doing that and
Yeah.
And I
appreciate
don't think
them
we,
giving us that
that we
information.
need to make a, I don't know, maybe we do need to make a motion or whatever, but we need to make sure that when we have questions that get answered, we get their 3 or 4 member committee
Yeah, sure.
copy of our questions and
exactly.
answers.
Because there's no reason, they're in the same boat as we are. They
Sure
want
they
to
are.
keep their funds spent locally
Yes.
as much as possible. So if we collect information
We'll
from
pass
Baker
it over.
Tilly, we'll share with them, they'll share with us.
Exactly.
so
And-
is everybody okay that when I get responses, not only do I share them with you, but whomever they tell me they want
The
shared with
ARP,
on their
Tell
committee,
Cities
they
Our
are.
other chairman is Kelly, so.
Okay.
Whoever,
Then
so
with
that-
Kelly or,
And she can
Or
pass it
the-
or the
over.
mayor's
And
office,
she can
right,
pass it
Or
over
both.
to the rest of the board.
right.
Well, what I would like, is Sherry's got a couple things here, I would like to get as big a group as possible, so if we have, 10 questions, we get them all assembled.
Right.
And at one time, we ask for their response rather than, because I know how they bill, it's
Mhm.
maybe 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You ask them one question, it takes them 2 minutes, you get charged for 15. So we assemble them in a group and ask them in one email, maybe 10 responses. It'll be more cost-effective for us.
Exactly.
I agree.
And one other thing I would like to designate, and however we address that Baker Tilly is going to get questions from her and her only, so we don't have some possibly from the general public that decides to call Baker Tilly for an answer on the ARP committee, and they answer it, and we get the bill as a committee. So
Right.
we target what we're going to pay for. So
So we let
they're
them
well
know.
aware of that. If they want to provide the answers, that's fine, but don't send us a bill for it.
Correct.
So, because I'm concerned, I know that it can go quick, when.
And,
attorneys are
people
involved.
can, it's amazing the way people can come up with phone numbers or
Oh, yeah,
whatever.
it's easy enough. And we can end up with large bills, and we'll
Absolutely.
think, why are we getting a bill like this? So,
Well, Randy, I guess my next question is, the ones that we have talked about,
let's just go through them, Charlie.
okay?
Yeah,
First one
see
I
what
got.
questions we have.
Yeah, first one, if I'm in the same order, everybody else, this is the paper I picked up.
Youth
Youth
First.
First, that's the first one.
That's a
Now,
20,000.
that is a mental health, correct?
Right.
Now, I don't have a problem with, other than them, Baker Tilly puts a contract together. Otherwise, I don't know that we need to go any farther. I think we were okay with that one. Is that the consensus?
Yes.
It's strictly mental health, and
Yes.
it's for Perry Central Schools, correct? Or no?
I don't remember.
I don't remember who it's for, but.
Yeah, my
it's
notes say
county.
Perry Central Community Schools, and they're providing, it's to help pay for an additional mental health services.
What was the name of that one?
Youth
Youth
First
Okay.
Incorporated.
Too many people.
And I don't feel like we need that one reviewed, unless
Okay.
you guys do.
No,
Yeah, I think the mental health's in general.
except
Yeah, but-
when we get to the revive.
Right. Life Springs is another one.
Yeah.
Hang on, I gotta find mine. I'm looking for my notes, I'm sorry.
I don't know if Sherry and Keith are aware of this, but the county each year has to give a certain amount of money to mental health and Life Springs, and beforehand it was, what was our other local that was bought out?
SERS.
Southern.
No,
Southern Hills.
Southern Hills.
Southern Hills.
This year, I think they received, Life Springs received $106,000 from the county, because that's state law. So that is eligible to any mental health services if they meet the qualifications by law. That it's not automatically that they get all of it. So we've been putting that information out too. Keith, you were talking about SERS, that would be disabilities.
yeah.
They have the same thing,
What is this?
it's mandated by law.
33.5 is what we allocated
And-
for them.
They had indicated it was for an added service of a peer recovery specialist.
Mhm.
And I don't know that we have any questions about that.
No,
I think that
I'm
one's
just
good.
letting everybody know about
Okay.
the other money.
Thank
So
you.
is that
To
one?
be aware of it.
and So for my notes, does that one need a contract too, no review?
It'll need a contract, they all need contracts.
They all need, so they need the contract, but
Because
this is
what
gonna
we
be a
want-
no review?
What we need, I would, as long as we agree, no review. I
No
think
review
that-
by Baker Tilly.
No
It'd be the
review.
same.
Okay.
What we want to do is make sure that the representations they made on their application are exactly what they're going to do with the money.
Okay.
And it's going to be a simple document, but we just want to, for the county's benefit, so that somebody doesn't represent they're going to provide mental health services, and then they go put a roof on their building.
Okay.
That puts us in violations, and we have
And
problems.
will Baker Tilly write this form out, I mean, this
Yes.
contract?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's one thing we want to engage them
Yes.
with, and I don't know when we do it or whether Tell City participates, but my thinking is if we can get a document that's pretty universal, that all people that we grant funds to outside of government would sign one of these to hold the county harmless, and also reaffirm that the documents and what they've represented is true, valid, and what they're going to use the funds for.
Right.
That way it keeps us from awarding something that might
And then
be
if you
wrong.
remember when Baker Tilly was here, Randy, they confirmed when you said that we definitely need that.
Right, so that we get them in. Then the next one we got is the Revive Counseling Center. It was $75,000. That was broke down, Keith, 45 for counseling, 30,000 for room renovations. We're in agreement that 30,000 wouldn't be applicable.
Appropriate.
Right.
So the question is, how are we going to handle that one? Do we want to fund the 45, or do we want to just pull the application
And wait for the next
and have them come back and?
My recommendation would be to table.
Josh, too, I would feel
either-
much better since they want to change their application on the use of that fund, even probably the 40,000 we were talking about for them.
For him to come in, he needs to come in
Well, he's just going to have
and
to
explain
reapply
what
or
he's
go through the
doing.
process.
Why?
Either that or just-
And he was told that over the, in the phone conversation, there was a possibility that he may have to start, and he was very clear that he understood that.
Okay.
So I think if we're going to ask them to reapply, we need a motion. If we're
Okay.
gonna nix that one, I mean, if we're
Okay.
gonna nix it completely or nix part of it, and somebody needs to make a clear motion as to what you want to do.
I'll make a motion. I mean, you know, the 30,000 isn't eligible, the repairing of the building, because it's capital improvement.
Correct.
And with him not having a place to go, I don't see how we can give him the 45 with so much uncertainty. But we would be glad to look his application, you know, a resubmittal.
Resubmit. And
So, just to clarify, is your motion that they not be funded in this round due to
Change of plan.
change of plans and some services are not eligible by the
Correct.
law?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you know, with so much uncertainty of what he's doing, even, it don't sound like he knows exactly.
Right.
He knows what he wants to do, but he don't know where he's gonna do it at, or.
And he
how he's
still
gonna do
has
it.
people that are in Owensboro, you know, he has to get the okay
Sure.
from them.
Okay.
So
So Pam, do
I,
you have that motion, how that all came about?
I think so. If you can,
Okay.
if you can understand all this, you're
Okay.
doing good.
So Keith made the motion,
and I'll second it.
Charlie second.
And I got part of Sherry's wording in there too, so I think I got it.
Okay. And basically what we're doing is we're not refusing him.
Right.
We're just not funding him in this round due to ineligibility of some of the
Change of
projects.
plans in the middle of the road.
And then the question as far as how the mental health will be carried out. So,
I'm fine with
all
that.
those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0 on that one. Knights of Columbus.
Hang on, I gotta find mine.
Okay, again,
What was their amount?
25,000.
Number 11.
What did you have? What is this for?
Okay, this was, well, I don't have really thorough notes on this one. This was to help with to obtain a new building because they had sold theirs because of the pandemic. And we had questions for them. One was sustainability, and one was the time frame, and another was what happened to the dollars from the sale of the project and the amount, and they gave us answers to those.
But now, since the whole plan is to get another building, are we stepping over this line again, Randy, on?
That's my concern, because I know they talked at one time to use the funds for renovation, another time they were talking about purchasing a food truck or something to that nature. Both of
I
us
think this is a
capital
Baker Tilly review.
I think that is a review.
Everybody okay with that?
We probably need to get clarity. Do we have clarity exactly what their plan is?
Well,
But
I
are
think we
just-
submit what
what
plan
they-
they
what
submitted
they-
in the
right.
application,
And
what they
if-
put in the
if
application.
Baker Tilly says yes, and we draw up that contract, and they said, well, this is not what we're going to do, then we don't have to.
Right. So,
Review.
the thought is to send that one to Baker Tilly.
Yes.
Okay, I need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Charlie, Sherry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. That one goes to Baker Tilly. So we'll have to collect that information from Emily, along with any other notes that Ryan provided. I think you talked to him, Sherry.
Yeah, I was the one who talked to him, so I should have
And
those.
if you're going to be the liaison
Right.
between Baker
I'll take
Tilly,
care of it.
you'll take care of it. Okay.
Good job.
Perry County Chamber of Commerce.
I gotta find their number too. Anybody know what number?
And that one was for $21,000.
Mhm.
Let's see.
I gotta find their number. Oh, number 16. Perry County Chamber of Commerce.
Now, what was the thoughts on their loss of revenue? I know I've got a note down here that they did lose revenue.
Okay, we had,
Membership, wasn't it?
I had it, for 2019, their gross revenue was 82,000. For 2020, it was 33K. And for 2021, it was 61K. And the way our rules went, where we were not looking at 2020, we were looking at 2021, so that would be the difference between 82K and 61K. It said they plan to use $17K for marketing by Feed the Giant and well, never mind. And they plan to use $25K for, quote, other. They have already been awarded $9,500 by other governmental agencies that does not need to be repaid. And so, what amount did he have on there that was approved?
We approved 21,000.
21,000.
Which that probably is the difference between 82 and 61.
Right.
And see, my question was, because I had written down 12.5K if funded, and the reason I wrote that down was because they had already been awarded $9,500 that doesn't need to be repaid.
Right.
So, I mean, if I'm wrong on that, someone please let me know.
I
Well,
agree with
could
you.
we refer back to the question Tell City asked about the Chamber of Commerce?
Oh, thank
Right.
you, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that.
As impact, they could receive funds.
I'm gonna, in this case.
Silly.
What?
I'm saying Baker's
That's
Deli.
exactly it. That's what I'm
Too
saying, too, 'cause
complicated. As Tom Hauser would say, it's too complicated.
It sounds like one of those things with how that operated, and especially their uses, what they're outlining, and with the fact that they did not allow that organization, it's treated different because what it is. I think that's above our pay grade, just to be safe.
Absolutely.
We send that into Baker Tilly also.
Does Perry County, do they ever mention what they're gonna use the funding for, but advertising and what else?
They were gonna use it to hire a marketing
Right.
consultant, and then the other 25K just said other. That's all it said.
So,
Well, wasn't there something that we had a debate that night, that when we had that,
Yes.
when we were awarding these, that they came on about is that Feed the Giant?
It's Feed the
That
Giant, yes.
Additional fees, and I think we actually okayed the additional that night, because I think it was actually a lower amount prior to that meeting.
I think we're almost asking the same question Telsey did. And we already got an answer, Telsey's already got the answer.
But I think that this is one of those
I
that
think
probably
so, too.
wouldn't hurt, Keith, just to double check.
have we got a motion, one way or the other?
I kind of think we already have the answer too.
Yeah, I do too, I
Well,
mean,
hey, then I'm fine. If you guys are
Let's read it.
satisfied with that
What do we
answer,
want to
I'm-
ask? Do we want to ask just to make sure?
Because it's a public organization, my preference would be is to provide all the documentation to Baker Tilly and let them come back down on that one, so that if nothing else, it's not our interpretation.
Right, because,
And then that way, I guess it's a cover year.
see why,
Yeah.
Okay, so is anybody going to make a motion?
I will make that motion.
You want to word it so that Pam can write it down?
I'm just putting it down as Baker Tilly review.
Baker Tilly review. Funding amount and usages.
And usage of it.
Eligibility.
The funding amount, I don't have a problem with, it's the
I do.
usage.
I do, I have a problem with the funding amount, but
So, who made that motion?
I did.
Charlie. Do we have a second? Silence.
you can second.
I'll second it. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Are you thinking still, or are you?
I'm gonna abstain from voting,
Okay. We're gonna go
but I'm not
3,
sure which way I wanna go.
0,
That's fine.
1 abstention. I don't know if any of us really are, Keith. We're trying to just,
I know.
Yeah, I
we
think.
want to be fair.
Just-
Yeah, absolutely, I wanna be fair.
Yeah.
For
And you
sure.
don't want to spend money,
No.
and then neither do I with the attorneys if we think we know the answer, but.
Yeah, I know.
The next one's the Perry County Museum.
14,000.
Yes.
How much?
14,000.
Thank you.
And I believe, if I find my notes, that they were using that, they have a loss and they were using that for operating expenses. They didn't have any capital projects. I've got to find it, but I'm thinking that's what I got down. They couldn't open up their facility, and,
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I have. I have the exact numbers, so there were no lost funds, but they do need a new vehicle, but this vehicle will be used
this is the
for-
museum? No.
Am I on the wrong one?
Yeah,
I'm so
you are.
sorry.
Yeah.
You are correct, they do have a loss. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we're up.
Yes, because, and this was for the care of the collection, and it was due to not having enough funds because they had lost revenue.
Yeah. You know, I should have highlighted these things.
It's number 2 if you're looking.
Is it? So it's gonna be back to my first one? Yeah.
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 They had a loss of 14K. I'm not sure what, I think they requested maybe 18K, and we approved 14K because that was their
That's their
loss.
And I've got a note down here, it's just a revenue patch for inability to host fundraising events.
Mm-hmm,
So I guess we're okay with that one?
I am.
I am,
I am.
because it's just replacing revenue they lost.
You
So no-
okay, Keith?
Yeah, I'm fine.
So no review.
No
So,
review.
No review, just a contract. Next one's the Schweitzer Fest. That's another one I don't have a problem with because they didn't host the event in 2020, and in 2021, their revenue was substantially down from 19.
You want number that was?
Schweitzer Fest?
I know theirs was very clear.
Yeah, 25,000.
Yeah.
Is that what it was, 25?
25.
Yeah. I have no problem, no review.
Keith,
I'm
you
fine
okay?
with it.
Sherry, you okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Theirs was, they submitted all the documentation.
Troy Fire Department.
What number?
I didn't put them in order.
Keith, the discussion was about government, and the only two fire departments in the county that are technically government are Tell City and Candleton. So the outlining, like Troy and them, were eligible to apply. That's just to give you an update, because I know you weren't here, because we had discussions about that.
Yeah.
The only question I've got on that one is, I know we didn't allow government entities in the first round to apply. They
Right.
weren't on the eligible group. And I looked up 501c3s or charitable organizations and could not find the Troy Fire Department. I found Anderson and the rest of them, but not that one. And I know whenever they submitted their W-9, I believe they submitted it for the town of Troy.
That was.
And so that led me to believe
Town of
It's a-
Troy is a government
it's a
agency.
Yes.
government entity, I think.
Should-
And I could not find where they are a charitable organization.
Do you think that's a,
And I think,
I do.
that's what they are. But if we want to, I think if we want to send that to Baker Tilly, we narrow it down, are they governmental or charitable?
Right.
Only question.
That's the only question.
Because they did have a loss.
Mhm.
We did approve the funds for, and I
Right.
don't think they're doing capital. I
Right.
think they're using it for operating expenses,
Right.
which is.
Repairs.
Which is
Yeah.
eligible.
Eligible.
Again. So I think the only question is, and then going forward, depending on how this works through, they could
Could apply. And when
reapply
we
if
get
they
to the
were
government.
determined they are governmental, because I know some of the other government entities
Are-
wanted to apply,
Mhm.
and we told them not this round. So.
And if they are not-for-profit, then we'd be okay.
Yes, so I think,
One question, okay.
one question.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
everybody okay with that one?
How much was this one for?
5,000?
5,000.
I think we should give it to him.
Well,
Because of the fact that most, well, I mean, the police department does, I think every city, Tell City agency for the most part, I ain't gonna say every one of them, but the cemetery does, the police department does, fire department does, has donation accounts. You know, but then they run all their, for the most part, under Tell City's wing, so to speak.
Sure. See, what we,
The,
Which makes them government
the
agencies.
fire department, really, legitimately, I'm not sure how it's set up now, by no means, because I don't have anything to do with the fire department. Fire department had a donation account, and then they had their own club account for years.
But see, that's the thing we
And
need.
the fire department ran off their own funds, I'm talking about back, all the way back into the '60s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They ran off what they made.
volunteer.
The
and
city,
donations
what was
from-
budgeted from the city,
Right.
never got touched. And I'd say that Troy is still set up, old style, so to speak.
I think the question, and it's not that whether they're eligible or not eligible, Keith, the committee, this is before me too, they determined they wanted to do nonprofits, small business, and mental health in the first round, and they were gonna do governmental
Later.
later. And it's not that, if Troy falls into that governmental category, it would be
Yes, sir.
unfair to grant them funds when we had other government entities that said, I'd like to apply, and we said not this round. So in essence, Troy, if they are deemed governmental, should reapply the next round. They've got their loss.
But I don't know that we need to, because if you couldn't find where they're,
They're a 501c3.
then that's, I don't think we need to,
They're probably governmental.
yeah, so I don't think we need to, if they didn't provide the documentation to show that they were, you can't find it. As much as I hate to say no to anybody, once again, I don't think we need to spend the money to find out an answer for a question we already know the answer to, and they're gonna have to reapply under government.
Unless we suspend that one, and just as we did the revive, and if we get documentation that proves they're 501c3, we'd go ahead with the grant.
Yeah,
I mean-
that would work.
Charlie, wait,
I mean,
this was hard.
I see both points, because, I know Anderson Township wanted to apply, and we said, wait for government, and
Right.
probably they could have applied.
you've got
Yeah.
multiple fire departments and
Yeah.
other entities like that, quasi-governmental.
I agree with tabling it just like we did the revive. They're on hold until they present documentation to show that they're
Not for
a
profit.
not-for-profit. They've got a group that they're wanting, not something that's set up, that they've applied for a number last week.
Right. It has to be during the
Sure,
effective period.
exactly.
Okay.
But
So-
All right, that's fine.
So we're gonna put them in the,
hold basket.
Well, I think we need a motion.
I make a motion
Table it.
to table them until
Like-
same as
They provide
revive.
documentation.
they provide documentation that they're not-for-profit,
May I ask a
not a
question
government
before we
agency.
do this? Mr. Chairman, are you going to contact these organizations and advise them why they're on hold and what they need to do?
Can. The other thing is, and we're getting a little ahead of what I was thinking, we have like 49 applicants that came in, and I was thinking if say 2 members of the committee, if so chose, could meet with any one of these groups that would like to have a discussion, and you take along your documentation and just talk about the rules we're working underneath. It's not anything against their project or the entity or what they're doing, it's just simply the rules. And it keeps us outside of revealing all their public information on a video. We can have an open discussion, but as long as we stay, say, 2 members, and because I know some of the churches are going to have questions and they're not going to like the answers, but rather than going through their whole budget for the public to review, it gives them a little bit of anonymity.
Would you want to do this after we get some questions answered from
Yes,
Baker
yes,
Tilly,
yes.
those first couple?
I think it's critical that we get our answers, because then when we come back, we can say, question number 9, and this is what would, if you chose to approach this, this is the response from Baker Tilly.
Right.
Rather than us speculating, and that way, we can, it's not that we don't want to fund them, it's Treasury's rules.
Right.
And that way, we can have that discussion with anyone that chooses to do that. It's kind of my thought. And I can, these others that we've suspended, we probably need to contact them because we actually allocated funds to them, and now we're kind of putting it on hold while we attempt to fund the remainder of them. So Keith made a motion to basically table this until
Sherry seconded.
documentation of being a nonprofit is provided.
I'll second
Sherry already seconded.
it. Oh, okay, then I'll vote yes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. The next one's William Tell Senior Citizens, and it was for $4,000.
9.
9?
I believe, no, 17.
Yeah, that,
I should have known.
17.
Yeah.
It's 4,000 or 17?
no,
No.
it's
No,
4,000.
no, no,
4,000.
I was just telling them what
Yeah.
number it is on the list.
Oh, gotcha.
So they had that revenue loss of $4,000, and they were using it to buy supplies. They had initially asked for $50,000, but we deemed the revenue loss just from that, comparing 19 to 21, was $4K.
Now, I've got a note down here, they were talking about buying new kitchen equipment.
Right, that was the additional money, and that's why, one of the things why I think we turned it down.
Reduced it to 4.
4,000.
Yeah.
And then I've got a note here that says they had lost dance revenue.
They had
Which-
lost, right.
Again, that would be an eligible expense because they can prove the fact that they lost the revenue, so.
I'm fine with going ahead with that without
Yeah.
review. It's the 4K that they asked for
For replacing the
supplies and
money,
replacing the revenue.
which is operating and revenue loss, so.
Okay.
I would think that's the case. So if everybody's okay with that one?
I'm fine.
Okay, so we're okay with that one. Okay, the next one is Hawhee Auction Service.
And again, I think that's lost of the revenue from
Number 49.
19 and 21, if they weren't able to do their options.
They had a huge loss of revenue, as well as they provided their profit loss statement, which showed loss in profit as well. And so I know there was some question on this because they had said they were going to buy a truck, and that's capital. But this is not in addition to, it is just loss of revenue, and what they choose to do with loss of revenue, they were gonna buy it anyway. It's not
Yeah.
a separate capital.
Right.
It's not like, well, we didn't have any lost revenue, and we're gonna use it to buy a truck. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
They
They lost it.
clearly proved loss
I
of
remember
revenue.
reading that one, and 2020 was awful, because they couldn't have auctions, and 2021, and I know a lot of people were hesitant to come out into large groups, even in 2021, and I think that's where they came up
The
short.
amount they asked for was exactly their loss of profit for the year. So even if you look at profit versus gross revenue, their loss in gross revenue was like 109,000, but their loss in profit was the 20K, and that's what they requested.
Is that what you granted, the 20K?
And that's what we granted.
Right.
And I have no problem with that.
I don't either.
The only thing is, I want to touch base with them and make sure they use it for operating expenses, just
Right.
don't.
Right, use some of their other money to buy a
They're gonna
truck,
buy
and
it.
use that for,
Just
yeah.
don't,
Okay.
so we don't
No review?
run into that one.
I agree with that if everybody else does.
No, I don't have a problem with, as long as, like Randy said, we get a contract
Yeah.
with them
Yeah.
saying that they're going to use it.
Everybody's going to get a contract.
I understand,
to make
but I'm
sure
just-
that They're,
They're-
but they just need to make them aware that it's used for operating expenses.
Right.
Not
That new
capital.
truck's gotta go be on hold.
They clearly
Yeah,
had a
they can
huge
move it some-
loss.
I mean,
Yeah.
from some other sales.
And the last one is Stiles and Simon Enterprises, and I didn't review that one, and so that's you three.
Yeah. And I think they showed that loss, didn't they?
They showed the
From
loss,
19 to 21?
and what they were requesting the money for was hiring, which is clearly something because of the increased rates, and they had a loss that they were not reimbursed for.
Okay. I have no problem
I
with
don't
that.
have a problem with it.
Actually, they had a greater loss than what they asked for.
How much did you grant them?
20K.
20, okay.
I have no problem with this.
I have no problem with it either.
No review?
No review.
No review.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's the group.
So I want to make sure, since I'm the one asking Baker Tilly, that I have this correct.
Well, you're not going to, well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The only two that we are requesting a review of are the KFC and the Chamber of Commerce. And we have two that we are tabling, but we're not going to ask Baker Tilly for a review on the two that we are tabling.
Until we get clarity.
Right, until we get clarity, and then if we still have questions, we'll get clarity. Then we'll ask Baker Tilly. But as of now, we only have the two organizations that we're asking their opinion if what we're awarding would be legal or not.
Right. And once the revive comes back, however that's worked through, we may have to request a response. And if my interpretation is the Troy Fire Department comes in with a 501c3,
Then we'll just give it to
then we
them.
would just vote once again
Yeah.
to give them the
Right.
money and move on.
Yeah.
That's the only obstacle I see on that one, is that they're governmental. It's not that we wouldn't potentially fund them in another round, so.
Randy, another question. I know at the last commissioners meeting, you guys appropriated to send to the council $1 million. Okay.
We did that, and to me, I'm not sure what the relevance is to that. I would like to keep it to the exact dollars that we're giving away, because my concern is you're putting it into the pot, and then if we don't, if you look at some of these things, I'm not so sure we're gonna have eligible
Right.
recipients to award that amount of money. So then we'd have to go back through some type of an action to bring it back, to put it back into the ARP funds to be distributed to another entity. I'm just,
But it's been done already.
yeah, it's.
Right, okay.
So-
It's been done.
So, now, once we hear from Baker Tilly and they come up with the contract, are we going to go ahead and turn this money over to these groups that?
Well, it's my vision, and I'm not sure that I'm correct on this here. We may want to ask Baker Tilly this question. I would assume that this contract would be drawn up, and then I would believe that the commissioners should sign it on behalf of the county. I don't know whether the council needs to also provide a signature, but I know the council will have to approve
Approve
it,
the money.
because the money will have to go through the system.
Yeah.
So,
The council's going to approve the $1 million that you guys
And
did
then it'll be
totally.
there.
Okay,
Yeah,
now-
we're talking about the
That's going to be
contract.
presented
I
to the
thought
council.
commissioners.
Well, he said they approved the money, but once, the council is actually going to have the full $1 million brought to, because that's what you guys
But the
approved.
council is not set in stone that the council has agreed to that $1 million yet.
Right. I mean,
The
that's what
council
the
may say
commissioners,
they're-
the commissioners are sending an additional to the council for the millions.
okay,
Correct.
Pam, take me through this. You're more versed than I am. We award, let's just in round numbers, $200,000 of these people are clear to be handed out. Okay, what steps do we take once Baker Tilly provides us the document? Am I correct in having the commissioners sign the
The
contract?
commissioners sign contracts,
with-
yes.
Okay, the entity receiving the funding.
Mhm.
Okay, so is there any action required by the council? Just commissioner signature?
Once
on
if
that?
if the council, let's just devil's advocate here, if the council approves the full $1 million that has been set aside out of the 1.2, you guys get the contract, commissioners sign the contract that they're okay, then no, the council has to do no other action on that part as long as these.
So my question then, Pam, is basically then, if the council approves the $1 million, they no longer will be asked to agree to where that money goes. It becomes strictly a commission.
Not until once it's gone.
Yeah.
And then there's still the
You guys need to-
200,000 left.
You need to be aware of that. So if we actually approve 200,000, and then we come back and approve another 200,000 later, and you're not comfortable with where it went, you do not have a say in where it goes.
I don't like
As
that.
a council.
I think the council needs to have the say.
I would rather have the council on board with everything we've
That's the
doing.
reason I think the council.
But this
should
$1
not-
million was set aside for these grants. And that's exactly what you guys signed off to, is out of that 1.2 that you set aside for this is what you're sending to the council for an additional.
But it was also set up to where the committee approves it, commissioners approve it, the council
And the
approves it.
council approve it.
The commissioners are
Subcommittee.
trying to
Yeah.
eliminate the council out of the picture.
What I'd like to do is have everybody on board. So that-
Exactly. It all runs way.
So we're all
We've
standing
seen
there
this-
together.
This poor ALP
And all get
committee,
shot together.
or fund, whatever, has had a,
We get shot.
it's had
twice.
tough roads. It's really been a lot of rules changed.
Yeah.
You only get it once.
Yeah. But that's something that the council, this is not a commissioner. this is
Correct.
approved
And
commissioner, so
technically, the
could-
council could deny the appropriation and reduce it, couldn't they?
Absolutely.
And approve whatever, as it
The
comes
money that
through.
we're talking about.
That keeps you a say in what happens, because.
I think partly, my understanding, I thought partly the $1 million, or the $1 million was done was because otherwise, when you're doing them in separate pieces, according to, when you guys have your meetings, it could delay an extra whole month before these people get their money.
Right.
And it was just to try to help, so that way, if you guys had meetings in between and everything fell into place and all was okay, and as long as I got the invoice, I could go ahead and write the checks out to the entities. Otherwise, they're waiting, and maybe possibly another month for additionals.
If we're on board with these actions, I'm not opposed to having a special meeting, but limited to
Not-
approval of this.
Yeah, not have them every
Well,
week,
not-
but
yeah,
You
we're
just have to
not- we're
realize,
not
on
gonna
additionals,
debate
I have to
every time we
advertise 10
meet.
days, 10
Right,
days before
right.
the council meets, so I have to have notice of that pretty quick.
So, but I mean,
I'm fine with that, and I think that that's something that the council needs to discuss.
That's you guys.
About just appropriating this amount.
whatever
I
you
mean, I
want to
don't,
do. That's you guys'
I'm not
call.
gonna, you guys decide.
Yeah.
You're the council.
Okay, let's get back to, is there any other questions at this time that we want to propose to Baker Tilly to get answered?
how many questions do you have, Sherry?
So far, we have 1, 2, 3, we have 4, well, we're not going to ask that about the contract, and we don't need to. So really only 3, whereas number 3 composes 2 different items.
Yeah.
The
So we
approval.
actually have 5. What we want to do is to engage them in providing a contract somewhat
So that's another,
universal. We just want to get them to write
provide
that
the
up
contracts.
to protect the county and have the representations that the entity receiving the funds has, properly and reviewed all the treasury documents and whatever, just to make sure we're
Right.
covered. And it should be something, try to make it as simple as possible. Let's not turn it into a 50-page ordeal.
Right.
And hopefully they can do that, quickly, so we can turn it over to Chris, so he can look at it
Yeah.
before you guys.
I doubt that
take a
Chris
look.
has a big problem with it because they're
Yeah.
another legal counsel, but it's good to have him review it.
Yeah, he's,
Just to make sure we're okay.
yeah.
I think they probably already have some draft things from the other
I'm
organizations they're
sure.
representing, so they should be able to
They've
do
got
it
a
pretty
lot of
quickly, you would think.
When I spoke to them in Bloomington at the council conference, they said they had already been dealing with a lot of different ones.
Did you put down the date, Sherry? We were using that required date of March.
Yeah, I have that
whatever.
down
Okay.
already.
To make sure we're right.
Mhm.
What else are we running into? I think the government entity part of it, just like they responded to Tell City, if the government uses it internally, it's not a problem. So I think that one's okay. Do we want to ask anything about infrastructure? Because I think we'll be looking at that as far as water, sewer, whatever lines. If there's anything, or do we want to wait till a later date?
I would like to wait. My big concern is,
Get through
should
these
we ask them
3
how we can, what can we,
And it's a capital project. I don't think they're eligible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if they tell us we-
Application's gonna
The
be out.
project, yeah, the project question is the one if they say no,
And
they
she's-
can't come
Yeah,
up and
that's
say
it.
they're gonna do that.
Right.
And if they come back and say they can use it for other 2020 losses, then that, at least some other people that could be eligible that
Possibly.
weren't,
Right.
possibly,
Well,
And
yeah.
then the
Right,
question then
19.
becomes is how we're going to carry
Yeah,
out the next step.
But I don't think we can do that without answers.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd say we get our
And I think
answers.
something else we're going to have to be careful of is, if they have presented documentation for capital improvement, which can't be funded,
Correct.
Right.
and then they verbally say, well, I've changed my mind,
I think they have to go back through the system again.
they got to start all over.
right, just like,
Sorry, this
Yeah.
application here is out.
But what we need to do is have the answers to the questions and
Right.
don't make them unduly go through
Right.
that action only
Yes.
to be told.
I think
you know,
it's wonderful, right, and it would be nice, in my opinion, to have several copies of the answers. Have some, and, get the application, highlight the answer to where it's,
well.
Where Baker
why-
Tilly
why
is
could-
telling
why
us
couldn't
no.
we put that on the internet?
we can put the questions and answers on there, absolutely.
Sure.
Is the city planning on doing that? Thank you so much for the questions and the answers, but does the city plan on showing that to the public, those questions?
They incorporated it in our draft application that's not released yet. It'll be released toward the end of the month. And then we're gonna have a workshop where Baker
Right,
Tilly
we
actually
were
comes
talking
down.
about that.
So then if there's any question about any of that stuff, we invite the public to come and that'll be their opportunity. to-
So-
That's
So
the
basically-
29th, isn't it, Kelly?
I don't-
On Monday?
I don't have it with me.
I think it's
And you can
29th
go on
and-
the City of Tell City's website, Facebook page, and then Perry County newspaper.
I was thinking it's like 29th, and you're going to release the applications like on the next morning, the 30th.
I don't
31st.
even know if it wouldn't be a bad idea to have it put in the paper, the questions.
Well, I mean, the more we can.
Yeah, advertise that
enlighten
people
with-
see it,
Yeah.
and they know we're not just coming up making excuses.
So, where we're at right now, and then we can, I guess, be done, but Sherry's gonna contact them. She's gonna be our contact person, do it in writing, not verbal. We'll collect these answers. We have a group in here that we're okay with actually providing money to, pending
A
a
contract.
contract with Baker Tilly that we can execute. We need to qualify who needs to sign it. We suspect the commissioners and then the entity that's receiving the funds. And we can move those along as quick as we can get that done. And then the other ones have to be revisited if new documentation comes in to support them, depending on Baker Tilly's answers back to the chamber and things of that nature.
Who's gonna submit the invoices to me
For these.
for payment?
For payments?
It would have to be the commissioners, wouldn't it?
No. She's thinking from, what we'd have to do, Pam, let's see, first thing we're gonna have to do is submit this amount to the commissioners of that group of people, once we get Baker Tilly to have the contract, to get them to approve those
Will the
things.
contracts have their each individual amount on there?
We should, yes.
So
Well,
if
that
I
works.
had, once you guys approve and you guys get the contracts and it has each individual amount, if I had a copy of the W-9 or something, as long as I had their name, address, and all that, I could probably take that and then we'll make a file and just put all grants
And
from.
then use the contract as your invoice to
Mhm.
generate the check.
Okay.
That's an easy way.
Yeah, because this way we don't have to fill out the separate invoices. I could go that route.
Right.
As long as I had all the information I needed with name, address, and the amount.
Yeah. We can get all that, that's not a problem. Once Emily gets back, they
And then we'll
provide-
just make a folder as far as grants from ARP
Right.
funding, and that way we'll have it all together.
Okay,
And
that works.
I'm assuming that once we get these answers back, then we'll try to set up another meeting?
Yep. Depending on how fast that Baker Tilly gets back to us and that, and then it'll bring some clarity and how fast, I mean, if they've got a general contract already
Yeah.
drawn up, it might be a day or two or whatever,
Yeah.
and we'll have it. I don't know.
Right,
So,
Yeah.
any other comments, questions?
No?
Thank you, Kelly.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Charlie,
Second?
second Sherry.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, we're out of
All
here.
right, class reunion time.
How many years, Charlie?
You,
Yeah.
man.
45?
45. Yeah, Paula was supposed to be there, and I guess they're out of town now.